This is a story about how I started my own business with no experience and ended up making my first million in 4 years, all while learning from mistakes, setbacks, and some serious luck. Here's how I did it. Step by step, brace yourself for a roller coaster ride. It all started back in 2017. I was 25, fresh out of college with a degree in business administration, and I had zero direction. I tried a few jobs here and there, mostly in sales, but I quickly realized that I was just a cog in someone else's machine, and I hated it. What frustrated me the most was how I felt like I was working for the paycheck, not because I believed in the company or its mission. Honestly, I felt stuck. I had a burning desire to do something on my own, but I didn't know what. One day, after another disappointing day at work, I found myself scrolling through Reddit, as I usually did when I needed a mental break. That's when I stumbled upon a post in the r/entrepreneur subreddit. Someone was talking about how they started an online business selling unique, niche products. They didn't have much experience, but they were making a decent income after just a year. Something clicked for me. What if I could do that? So, I spent the next few months diving deep into the world of e-commerce. I read articles, watched YouTube videos, and listened to podcasts. I learned everything I could about starting an online business, marketing, product sourcing, dropshipping, branding, and customer service. One thing I quickly realized was that I didn't need to reinvent the wheel. The internet was already filled with successful entrepreneurs who had figured things out. I just needed to follow their footsteps and carve my own niche. In the beginning, I wasn't sure what product to sell. I didn't want to sell something generic like t-shirts or phone accessories. There was just too much competition. So, I thought about my own interests. I had always been into home improvement and DIY projects. I knew a lot about tools and gadgets. That's when I had the idea, what if I could sell high-quality, unique tools and gadgets that weren't easily found in stores? Something that would appeal to people who loved working on their homes and projects. I spent weeks researching suppliers, building a basic website, and setting up a Shopify store. I had no technical skills, so I used a template and customized it as best as I could. I didn't have much capital to invest, so I bootstrapped everything, using credit cards to pay for the website, product inventory, and ads. The most stressful part was getting the first few sales. I felt like I was throwing money into the void, and nothing was coming back. After months of experimenting with different marketing strategies, I finally found something that worked: Facebook ads. At first, my ads were terrible. I had no idea how to target the right audience or create compelling ad copy. But slowly, I learned what was working and what wasn't. I started seeing small, incremental gains, like getting my first few sales after weeks of trying. It felt like a victory. But success didn't come overnight. I faced a ton of obstacles along the way. First, my initial supplier ended up being unreliable. I had ordered a batch of tools, but they were delayed for months, and my customers were furious. I had to eat the costs and offer refunds, which drained my cash flow. Then there was the time when my website crashed for a whole day, and I lost hundreds of potential sales because I didn't have proper backup systems in place. Despite these setbacks, I kept going. I kept tweaking my ads, changing my product offerings, and slowly building up a small following on social media. One of the turning points came when I decided to focus on building an email list. I started offering free guides and how-to videos for home improvement enthusiasts, which helped me gain trust and credibility with my audience. Over time, my email list grew, and it became one of my most valuable assets. By 2019, I was finally starting to see consistent sales. I had learned to scale my ads and target the right customers. I had also expanded my product line to include exclusive gadgets that couldn't be found anywhere else. My website was getting more traffic, and the positive reviews started rolling in. But there was still a huge problem: I wasn't profiting as much as I should have been. It took me a while to realize that my margins were too thin. I was so focused on making sales that I wasn't paying enough attention to my costs. Shipping was eating up a massive chunk of my profits. I didn't have any proper negotiation skills with suppliers, and my inventory management was inefficient. I spent countless hours trying to streamline things and reduce costs. The breakthrough came when I decided to partner with a logistics company that specialized in e-commerce businesses. They helped me streamline my shipping process, negotiate better rates with suppliers, and handle customer service more efficiently. I also shifted my focus to increasing my average order value. I started offering bundles and upselling products that made sense to customers, and that significantly improved my profits. In 2020, just as the pandemic hit, I saw a massive spike in sales. People were spending more time at home, and they were looking for ways to improve their living spaces. My business was in the right place at the right time. I was now making enough money to hire a small team, which allowed me to focus on scaling even more. By the end of 2021, my company had hit its first $1 million in revenue. But even as the business grew, I faced new challenges. Managing a team of employees was nothing like running a solo operation. There were growing pains, miscommunications, delayed projects, and differing opinions on the direction of the company. It was a huge learning curve for me, but I eventually found my footing and learned how to lead with empathy, delegate effectively, and foster a company culture that encouraged innovation. In the years that followed, I continued to expand my product offerings, improve customer experience, and optimize my operations. Today, my business has not only hit the seven-figure mark, but we're also expanding into international markets and exploring new verticals. I'm still learning every day, but I can't believe how far I've come from where I started. The most important lesson I've learned throughout this journey is that success doesn't come easy. There were so many times when I wanted to give up, but I kept pushing forward because I believed in the vision. There's no shortcut to building a successful business. It's a grind, and you have to be willing to put in the work, even when things aren't going well. So, if you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is this: start with something you're passionate about, but be ready to learn as you go. You will make mistakes, and things won't always go according to plan. But if you're persistent, adaptable, and willing to take risks, you can build something incredible. Keep going, even when it feels impossible. That's the only way to win in the long run. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. This is a story about how I built my own business from scratch, faced failure after failure, and eventually found success. It's not the usual, I quit my job, started a business, and now I'm living the dream story. Mine is messier, more complicated, and definitely not a straight path. But if you're someone who's trying to build something from nothing, this might resonate with you. I was 23 when I decided I was going to be my own boss. I had just graduated college, and to be honest, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I majored in business, but I wasn't passionate about the corporate world. I didn't want to work a 9-to-5. All I knew was that I wanted to create something, to build something that was truly my own. The first idea I had was to start a mobile app. At the time, the app market was booming, and it seemed like everyone was making millions from simple apps. I thought, how hard could it be? So I spent the next few months learning how to code. I watched tutorials on YouTube, read blogs, and experimented with building simple apps. I was determined to make it work. But reality hit fast. My first few app ideas were terrible. One was a social media platform for pet owners. Don't ask why. I don't know. Another was a shopping app that no one seemed interested in. I spent thousands of dollars on developers, advertising, and marketing. But I wasn't making any money, and I quickly ran out of funds. By the time I turned 25, I was broke and disillusioned. I had spent the last 2 years chasing an idea that wasn't working. I moved back in with my parents, feeling defeated and embarrassed. My friends were all climbing the corporate ladder, getting promotions, and living normal lives. And here I was, with no job and no money. But I didn't want to give up. After a few months of soul-searching, I decided to pivot. Instead of focusing on tech and apps, I thought I'd try something completely different, an e-commerce store. It seemed like a safe bet. People were buying things online, and all I needed was a product and a website. How hard could that be? I started researching products to sell. I went through countless ideas, selling gadgets, clothing, fitness products, and finally landed on the idea of selling eco-friendly home goods. I thought, people care about the environment now, and there's a growing market for sustainable products. It felt like the perfect niche. I didn't have any money left, but I used what little I had to create a basic website and buy a small inventory of products. I found a supplier who made eco-friendly cleaning products, reusable kitchen items, and organic personal care items. I didn't know much about branding or marketing, but I figured I could learn. At first, it seemed like the right move. I built a basic Shopify store, took some pictures of the products using a cheap camera, and launched the site. I started promoting it on Instagram and Facebook, targeting eco-conscious consumers. But once again, things didn't go as planned. For months, I barely made any sales. The few people who visited my website didn't seem to be interested in buying. I spent money on ads that didn't convert. I felt like I was pouring all my energy into a black hole. At that point, I almost gave up again. I was on the verge of quitting, telling myself I just wasn't cut out for entrepreneurship. But then, something clicked. I realized that I was making a huge mistake by trying to sell products without building a real connection with my potential customers. I wasn't offering them value beyond just the products. So, I decided to try something completely different. I started focusing on creating content. I began writing blog posts about eco-friendly living, DIY home cleaning recipes, and sustainable lifestyle tips. I also started a YouTube channel where I talked about eco-friendly products, shared tutorials, and gave advice on how to live more sustainably. At first, it was slow going. I didn't have many followers, and my videos had hardly any views. But over time, people started noticing. My blog posts began to get some traction, and my YouTube videos started to attract a small but dedicated audience. People began trusting me as a source of information on sustainability, and as a result, my products started to sell. Slowly but surely, sales started to pick up. It wasn't overnight. It took months of consistent effort before I started seeing real results. But after about a year of building content and refining my marketing strategy, I finally started turning a profit. The key was creating a community around my brand, not just trying to sell products. I focused on building relationships with my customers and offering them value beyond just the products I was selling. I'll never forget the moment when I made my first big sale. It was a $100 order from someone I had never met, and they left a message saying how much they loved the blog content I was putting out. That's when I realized that building trust and providing value was the real way to succeed in e-commerce. As my business grew, I reinvested everything back into it. I hired a team, expanded the product line, and focused on improving the customer experience. I learned a ton along the way about marketing, customer service, product sourcing, and branding. The business began to take off, and I finally felt like I was on the right path. Fast forward to today, and my business is doing well. We've expanded into new markets, and I'm able to hire more people. I still run the business, but I now have a team that handles the day-to-day operations, which has given me more time to focus on growth and innovation. The road to success wasn't easy. There were a lot of sleepless nights, failures, and moments where I felt like giving up. But looking back, I realized that every failure taught me something valuable. Every setback forced me to rethink my approach, and every small win was a reminder that persistence pays off. If there's one piece of advice I'd give to anyone starting out, it's this: don't be afraid to fail, and don't be afraid to pivot. The road to success is rarely linear, and you're going to face a lot of bumps along the way. But if you keep learning, adapting, and pushing forward, you'll eventually get there. I'm still far from being where I want to be, but I've come a long way. And I've learned that success isn't about finding the perfect idea or getting everything right on the first try. It's about resilience, adaptation, and building something that matters. So, if you're thinking about starting your own business, know that it's not going to be easy. You'll face plenty of challenges, but don't give up. Keep going, keep learning, and keep moving forward. Your breakthrough might be just around the corner. I've been an entrepreneur for about 12 years now, and let me tell you, it hasn't been a smooth ride. I don't come from a family of business owners, and the concept of entrepreneurship was something I only heard about in passing before I jumped in. This is the story of how I stumbled, fumbled, and eventually built something sustainable from the ground up. Back in 2011, I was fresh out of college. I had a degree in marketing, but no real idea of what to do with it. I ended up working a corporate job at a marketing firm, which wasn't terrible, but it wasn't fulfilling either. The 9-to-5 grind was getting old, and I could feel myself slowly sinking into that "I'm going to work this job forever" mindset. I wasn't comfortable with that. One evening, a conversation with a friend of mine changed everything. He had just started his own small e-commerce store, selling custom t-shirts. It wasn't exactly groundbreaking, but it was something he'd built on his own. We were sitting at a bar, having a few beers, and he casually mentioned how much money he made in his first month. My jaw nearly hit the floor. The number wasn't huge, but it was enough to make me think, why can't I do this? I didn't have any experience with e-commerce, but I was determined to learn. I spent the next few weeks consuming everything I could find online: YouTube tutorials, blog posts, podcasts. The learning curve was steep, and the more I learned, the more overwhelmed I felt. But I kept pushing. I started small with a dropshipping model. It seemed like a low-risk way to get my feet wet. I didn't have to invest in inventory, and I could market products from suppliers to customers for a cut of the sale. My first website was awful. It looked like something a middle schooler would put together on their first attempt at web design. But somehow, I made a few sales. These tiny wins gave me enough confidence to keep going. The process was frustrating, and I felt like I was just throwing darts in the dark, hoping something would stick. But as the months went on, the sales slowly increased. I was working nights and weekends, running ads on Facebook, and testing different products, all while still working my full-time job. Then came my first big failure. I decided to expand my business by purchasing a large batch of inventory from a supplier. It seemed like a great idea at the time. I thought I could sell the items at a higher margin and keep all the profits to myself. But I made the classic mistake of overestimating demand. The product sat in my garage for months. I was sitting on thousands of dollars worth of inventory that wasn't moving. My credit card bills were stacking up, and I was barely breaking even. At that point, I seriously considered quitting. It was exhausting, and I was losing money. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was so close to something. So, I decided to pivot. I sold off the inventory at a loss just to get it out of my garage, and I went back to dropshipping. This time, I took a different approach. I started learning about niche markets and focusing on building a strong brand. Instead of selling random products, I started focusing on one specific category, pet accessories. I've always loved animals, so it was something I could get behind. I started small again, testing products like pet collars, leashes, and toys. The more I learned about the pet industry, the more I realized it was booming. I didn't have a huge marketing budget, so I started building my presence on Instagram. I posted cute pet photos, ran giveaways, and started to build a following. Slowly but surely, my business started to gain traction. One of the biggest turning points came when I decided to focus on customer experience. I wanted to create a brand that was more than just a store. I wanted it to be a community. I started offering personalized pet products, sending handwritten notes with each order, and going above and beyond to surprise my customers with small gifts. The feedback was overwhelming. People loved the personal touch, and they started sharing their experiences on social media. This word-of-mouth marketing was priceless. By 2016, I was able to quit my full-time job and focus on my business full-time. I was finally making enough money to support myself, and I was excited to see where it could go. But it wasn't all smooth sailing from there. As my business grew, I faced new challenges. I had to learn about managing inventory, hiring employees, and scaling operations. It wasn't just about selling products anymore. It was about managing a growing company. One of the hardest lessons I learned was the importance of delegation. I've always been a control freak, and I wanted to do everything myself. But I quickly realized that I couldn't scale if I was wearing all the hats. I started hiring a small team of people, each responsible for different parts of the business. That's when I started to see real growth. In 2018, I decided to take the leap and invest in my own product line. I wanted to create something unique that wasn't available anywhere else. After months of research and development, I launched my own line of premium pet accessories. The first batch of products was small, but they were high quality, and people loved them. I worked with influencers in the pet community to promote the products, and that helped boost sales even further. But as the business grew, I found myself dealing with even bigger problems. There were supply chain issues, customer service complaints, and increasing competition. I was constantly putting out fires, and it felt like I could never take a break. The pressure was intense, and I often found myself questioning whether I was cut out for this. However, I kept pushing through. I hired a customer service team to handle inquiries, worked with manufacturers to streamline production, and focused on building strong relationships with my customers. It wasn't easy, but over time, I built a team that could handle the day-to-day operations, which allowed me to step back and focus on strategy and growth. In 2022, I sold the business for a sizable sum. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt like the right time. The market was changing, and I had built something sustainable that I was proud of. Selling it wasn't the end of my journey, though. I still wanted to stay involved in the entrepreneurial world, so I started a new venture, a consulting business where I help other entrepreneurs build and scale their companies. Looking back on my journey, there were so many highs and lows. I made mistakes, lost money, and doubted myself more times than I can count. But I also learned incredible lessons, met amazing people, and built something from nothing. If there's one thing I've learned in this whole experience, it's that entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint. You need to keep learning, adapting, and evolving. The road will never be easy, but if you keep pushing forward, you just might build something that lasts. I was always the kind of person who believed in having a solid 9 to 5 job. You know, the kind of life everyone talks about as the safe route. I didn't come from money, and my parents always drilled into me the importance of a steady paycheck. College was a given, and getting a good job right after graduation was the next milestone. I followed this path for years, clocking in and out of jobs that kept the lights on but didn't exactly set my soul on fire. I was content with my routine until one day, the rug was pulled out from under me. It was a typical Wednesday morning when I got the email. I was just finishing my coffee at the office, scrolling through the news when I saw the subject line. Company restructure, immediate changes. For a moment, I thought it was a standard memo about new policies. But as I opened the email, I felt my stomach drop. The company I had been working at for 5 years was laying off 40% of its workforce, and I was one of the casualties. I sat there, staring at the screen, my heart racing. In an instant, everything I'd known about stability and safety came crumbling down. I wasn't alone in this. There were 15 of us in my department, and everyone seemed just as shocked and lost as I was. After a few awkward meetings and HR consultations, we were all shown the door with a severance package that barely covered a few months of rent. I remember walking out of the office building with a box of personal items, unsure of what to do next. The world had suddenly become a lot less certain. The first few weeks were tough. I spent the days applying for jobs, updating my resume, and reading job boards, but nothing felt right. I had always been someone who worked for someone else, clocking in and out, and the thought of starting over was terrifying. But as time went on, I started feeling something else too: anger. Why had I let myself get so dependent on someone else for my livelihood? Why had I placed so much trust in a company that could dispose of me at the drop of a hat? I started reflecting on my life, asking myself if this was it. Was I going to keep chasing after someone else's vision, working on projects that had no real meaning to me? Or could I carve out my own path and do something that truly inspired me? The answer was clear. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew I had to try something different. One day, while browsing social media, I stumbled upon an ad for an online course about digital marketing. It was the kind of thing I had never considered before. I had always been tech-savvy, enjoyed working on websites and social media for side projects, but never thought it could be a real career. The course promised to teach how to build and grow a successful online business from scratch, and I felt a spark of curiosity. After all, I had nothing to lose. With a little hesitation, I signed up. The course was intense, but it felt like a lifeline. I spent hours after hours reading, taking notes, and practicing what I learned. SEO, email marketing, content creation, I was immersed. For the first time in a long time, I felt excited about learning something new. Every new module made me more confident in the idea of starting my own business. But there was one problem. I had no idea what kind of business I wanted to create. For weeks, I tried to figure it out. I thought about launching an online store, maybe something in the fashion or tech space. I even considered creating a blog, but nothing felt quite right. Then, one night, as I was scrolling through Instagram, I saw an influencer promoting a course on how to turn your passion for photography into a side hustle. It was like a light bulb went off. I loved photography. It had always been a hobby of mine, but I had never considered it as a real business. What if I could combine my new digital marketing skills with my love for photography? And that's when it hit me. I decided to create a brand dedicated to teaching people how to use photography as a tool for personal branding and business growth. I would offer online courses, coaching, and resources for aspiring entrepreneurs who wanted to level up their social media presence with high-quality photos. The idea was simple, but it felt like the perfect intersection of my skills and passions. The first few months were a blur of trial and error. I built my website, created an Instagram account, and started posting regularly. I reached out to local businesses and offered free photography sessions in exchange for testimonials. I was grinding, working late nights and weekends, trying to figure out what worked and what didn't. Slowly but surely, people started to notice. My first client was a local yoga instructor who wanted professional photos for her website. She loved the photos, and from there, word of mouth spread. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were countless times I felt like giving up. I had no experience in running a business, and there were days when I doubted myself. Was anyone really going to pay for my services? Was I just another wannabe entrepreneur with a dream? I almost quit a few times, but something kept me going. I could see small signs of success, more followers, positive feedback from clients, and, most importantly, the knowledge that I was building something of my own. 6 months in, I was finally starting to make a real income. I had built a small but loyal client base, and I began offering paid photography workshops. I even started collaborating with other local entrepreneurs to host joint events. The business was growing steadily, and with each new project, I felt more confident in my abilities. Fast forward to today, and I am proud to say that my business is thriving. It's been over 3 years since I started my photography and digital marketing brand, and I now have a team of 5 people working with me. We offer a full suite of services, from one-on-one coaching to large-scale brand photography projects. My life is completely different now. I wake up every day with purpose, knowing that I am building something meaningful. I know I took a big risk, and the road wasn't easy, but I can honestly say that losing my job was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to reevaluate my life and pushed me to take that leap of faith into entrepreneurship. There's a freedom in creating something from nothing, and while it's not always easy, it's incredibly fulfilling. If you're on the fence about starting your own business or taking that leap, my advice is simple: go for it. The fear will always be there, but so will the rewards. This is the story of how I went from a broke college graduate with a mountain of student debt to owning a small business that now makes 6 figures a year. It wasn't a straightforward journey, and there were plenty of bumps along the way, but looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. It all started in 2016. I had just graduated with a degree in marketing. My college years were filled with excitement, late nights, and occasional self-doubt, but I managed to finish strong. My parents were proud, but they were also worried about my future. The job market was tough, and even though I had good grades, the competition was fierce. Every job I applied for seemed to have someone with more experience than me, or they were looking for something specific that I didn't have. So there I was, a fresh graduate, with a lot of ambition but very little direction. I spent 6 months applying to jobs, getting a few interviews, but never landing anything. During that time, I was living with my parents to save money, but the reality of having no income and not knowing what to do next was wearing me down. That's when I had a conversation with one of my high school friends, Jake, who had started his own e-commerce store a couple of years earlier. He was doing okay, not huge, but he was making enough to live comfortably and support his family. We talked about how I was struggling, and he casually mentioned that he had been thinking of expanding his business and needed some help with marketing. At first, I wasn't sure. I had no experience with running a business. I knew how to make a website look pretty, and I understood marketing theory from my degree, but I had never been hands-on with a real business before. Still, after some thought, I decided to go for it. I figured that if I didn't, I might end up stuck in the same place forever. I started working part-time for Jake, helping him with social media, paid ads, and creating some content for his website. The first few months were tough. I was learning on the go, and Jake had his own ideas about how things should be done. We had some disagreements, but overall, I was learning a lot. The results were slow at first, but after 6 months, sales started picking up. We doubled revenue that year, and I was starting to feel confident about my skills. Then, things took a turn I wasn't expecting. In 2018, Jake approached me with an offer I couldn't refuse. He was thinking of selling his business to focus on another project he was passionate about. He said he was willing to sell me the business at a price I could afford if I was interested. I had never thought about owning a business, but I had a gut feeling that this was my shot. I didn't have the money to buy it outright, but Jake was willing to finance the sale, which was a huge risk, but I trusted the numbers. With my knowledge of the business and my growing confidence in running it, I took the leap and bought it. Owning the business was a whole new ball game. The first few months felt like a roller coaster. Suddenly, I was responsible for everything: product sourcing, customer service, marketing, finances, you name it. I remember waking up at 3 a.m. some nights, checking my email for customer complaints, or dealing with problems that I hadn't anticipated. There were moments when I felt completely overwhelmed, like I had made the wrong decision. But I kept pushing forward, reminding myself that I had made it this far, and I couldn't give up now. The real turning point came when I realized I had to stop trying to do everything myself. I had the business skills, but I didn't have the technical knowledge in areas like product sourcing and supply chain management. I hired a couple of people to help out, a logistics manager and a customer support lead. That decision made a huge difference. They were both incredibly talented, and they allowed me to focus on growing the business rather than being stuck in the weeds. With their help, we streamlined our processes, improved our customer service, and made our marketing campaigns more effective. We also started expanding our product line based on the feedback we were getting from our customers. This helped us stand out in the market and gave our loyal customers more reasons to come back. Sales started growing exponentially. By the end of 2019, the business had tripled in revenue, and we were getting noticed in our niche. I was finally in a place where I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. In 2020, the pandemic hit, and suddenly, everything was in flux. Consumer behavior changed almost overnight, and we had to adapt quickly. Our supply chains were disrupted, our marketing efforts became less effective as people's attention was pulled elsewhere, and for a few months, it felt like the world was crumbling around us. I remember having long nights, pacing back and forth in my apartment, worrying about how we would survive. That's when I realized that I needed to focus on what made us unique. While most businesses were cutting costs and focusing on survival, I decided to double down on quality and customer experience. We increased our marketing efforts, offering discounts and incentives to our loyal customers. We also launched a social media campaign that gave back to local communities, donating a portion of sales to charity. This not only helped us stay connected to our customers, but also gave them a reason to continue supporting us during such uncertain times. By the end of 2020, we had weathered the storm. In fact, we had our best year yet, increasing revenue by 50%. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about the relationships we built with our customers and our team. I had learned that business wasn't just about making sales. It was about creating value and making a positive impact. Now, here we are in 2025, and the business is still growing. We've expanded into new markets, and I've hired a talented team to help me scale even further. Looking back at where I started, struggling to find a job, living with my parents, and wondering if I'd ever make it, I can't believe how far I've come. But there's no way I could have done it without the support of my team, my customers, and the belief that I could make something great out of nothing. So if you're reading this and feeling stuck or unsure about your next move, take it from me. It's okay to take risks. It's okay to fail, and it's okay to ask for help. But most importantly, it's okay to believe in yourself. You might not see the results immediately, but with persistence and the willingness to adapt, you can turn your dreams into reality. A few years ago, I was a struggling 22-year-old who had no idea what I was doing with my life. I had just graduated from a mediocre state school with a degree in business, but I wasn't sure if that even mattered anymore. I was living in my parents' basement, working a dead-end job at a call center, and feeling like I was getting nowhere. But I had a fire inside me. I knew there was more to life than this, and one day I decided I wasn't going to wait around anymore. I would create my own future on my own terms. It started with an idea. I had always been fascinated by the sneaker culture, how people were willing to pay ridiculous amounts of money for limited edition sneakers. I noticed something interesting. These sneakerheads were very passionate, but there was no reliable place for them to connect, buy, and sell their shoes. Sure, there were some platforms out there, but they didn't feel like they were tailored to the community. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this could be an opportunity. A marketplace specifically for sneakerheads, built by someone who understood the culture. I didn't have much money to start with, maybe $200 in savings and a credit card I was terrified to use. But I had something far more valuable, time. Since I wasn't working full-time, I decided to spend every single free minute I had researching the sneaker market. I joined online communities, followed influencers, read every article I could find about sneaker flipping, and learned all about the brands, the hype, and the supply and demand cycles. Once I felt I had a solid understanding of the market, I began to look into building a website. I didn't know the first thing about coding or design, so I turned to free platforms like WordPress and Shopify. After a few weeks of trial and error, I managed to create a basic website where people could list their sneakers for sale. It wasn't much, but it was something. I spent the next few months contacting local sneaker stores and individual sellers, trying to get them on board. At first, everyone turned me down. I was just a kid with a half-baked website and no real credibility. But I didn't give up. I kept sending emails, making calls, and even showing up at stores in person, pitching my idea to anyone who would listen. One day, after months of rejection, I got a lucky break. A small local sneaker shop agreed to let me list their inventory on my site. It wasn't a huge deal, but it felt like a victory. I listed their shoes, marketed the hell out of the store, and to my surprise, the shoes sold. Not only did they sell, but the shop owner was impressed with how quickly they moved. He came back to me with an offer. He wanted me to sell their shoes exclusively on my platform, at least for a while. This was my big break. From there, things started to snowball. More shops signed on, more customers started visiting the website, and I started gaining traction. I reinvested every penny I made into advertising, social media, and improving the website. I even hired a couple of freelance developers to help me improve the site's functionality and make it look more professional. I still wasn't making a lot of money, but the platform was growing. However, my biggest challenge came when I realized that I needed to scale. I had no idea how to handle the logistics of running a rapidly growing business. My website was getting more traffic than I had ever expected, but I was still using my basement as an office and juggling everything by myself. The biggest problem was shipping. As the orders started coming in, I found myself spending hours packing boxes and printing labels. I had no time for anything else. I decided to outsource fulfillment. This was a scary decision, but it turned out to be one of the best choices I ever made. I partnered with a third-party logistics company, 3PL, that handled all the shipping for me. It wasn't cheap, but it freed up my time and allowed me to focus on growing the business. In the meantime, I started reinvesting profits into inventory. I began buying sneakers directly from manufacturers and wholesalers, which gave me a better margin and allowed me to offer exclusive products. But the real game changer was when I discovered influencer marketing. I reached out to a few smaller sneaker influencers, offering them free shoes in exchange for posts on their Instagram or YouTube channels. The response was overwhelming. People loved it, and soon I had a small army of influencers promoting my site. The combination of influencer marketing, better products, and more streamlined operations caused my sales to skyrocket. By the end of my second year in business, I had built a small team of employees, and we were pulling in 6 figures in revenue. It wasn't easy, though. I had to learn how to manage people, handle customer complaints, and make strategic decisions about the future of the company. I'd be lying if I said I didn't screw up along the way. There were plenty of late nights, failed marketing campaigns, and missteps in product sourcing. But with each mistake, I learned and improved. In my third year, I made a bold move. I invested in a custom mobile app for the business. I wanted to create a seamless shopping experience for my customers and tap into the growing mobile commerce trend. It was a huge risk, but it paid off. The app was a hit, and we saw a significant increase in sales. This was the moment I realized the power of thinking long-term. It wasn't just about quick wins anymore, but about building something that would last. Fast forward to today, and the business is completely different. We've expanded into multiple countries, partnered with some of the biggest sneaker brands in the world, and turned the site into a thriving community where sneakerheads can connect, buy, and sell without the usual hassle. We even launched our own line of exclusive sneakers. I'm no longer the 22-year-old kid sitting in my parents' basement. I've got a full-fledged company with a great team, and we're doing millions in revenue every year. But the most rewarding part of this journey isn't the money or the success. It's the fact that I built something from nothing. I remember what it felt like to be stuck and frustrated, wondering if I would ever amount to anything. And now I know that if you've got the right mindset and work your ass off, anything is possible. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm excited for whatever comes next. I've learned that being an entrepreneur isn't about having a big idea. It's about being willing to put in the work to make that idea a reality. It's about resilience, adaptability, and constantly learning from your failures. I'll keep building, keep growing, and keep chasing the next big thing. I've always been a behind-the-scenes person. Growing up, I never thought I'd be in the public eye or lead any major company. In fact, I used to be the quiet one, always observing others and trying to figure out how they made things work. But life has a funny way of pushing you into roles you least expect. This is the story of how I went from working in a corporate cubicle to running my own multi-million-dollar business, all while navigating the highs and lows of entrepreneurship. It all started a few years ago. At the time, I was in my late 20s and working as a marketing manager at a large corporation. I had a steady job, decent pay, and the security that most people would envy. But something was missing. The work was uninspiring, and the idea of climbing the corporate ladder felt more like a slow, monotonous journey than an exciting challenge. I knew I needed to do something else, but I had no idea what. One evening, I was scrolling through Reddit, like I did every night, and I came across a thread discussing side hustles. Most of the replies were about drop shipping or becoming an influencer, but one post caught my eye. A user shared their experience with starting a subscription box business. The idea intrigued me. I had always been a fan of niche markets, and the thought of curating a product box around a specific theme felt exciting. It wasn't something I had seen done well in the space, and that sparked an idea. The next few weeks were a blur of research. I devoured every article, watched countless YouTube videos, and read any book I could find about subscription box businesses. I quickly learned that this wasn't going to be an easy road. Subscription box businesses were booming, but many struggled to stand out in a crowded market. Still, I wasn't deterred. I thought, if I could find a niche that hadn't been fully explored, maybe I could make something work. The concept I landed on was a subscription box for people who were passionate about home brewing, beer, mead, and even kombucha. I had no experience in brewing, but I knew there was a growing community around it. There were plenty of enthusiasts, but they often struggled with sourcing the right ingredients, tools, and learning resources. I could provide them with all of that in one box each month, along with exclusive content, recipes, and tips. So, I started putting together a business plan. I had no savings to fall back on, and I was still working full-time, so I knew I'd have to bootstrap the whole thing. I also didn't have the experience to immediately jump into product sourcing, shipping logistics, or any of the technical parts of the business. But I was determined to learn. The first hurdle I faced was sourcing the products. I reached out to suppliers, but many of them weren't interested in working with someone who didn't have an established track record. I didn't let this discourage me. Instead, I found smaller, niche suppliers who were just as eager to get their products into the hands of passionate homebrewers. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of cold emails and unanswered phone calls, but eventually, I found the right partners. The next step was setting up a website and an e-commerce platform. This is where things got tricky. I had no technical skills and had no idea how to build a website. So, I turned to freelancers. I hired someone on Fiverr to design the site, and I worked with a different freelancer to handle the back-end setup. It took longer than I expected, but by the end of it, I had a working website and a basic subscription model set up. Now came the fun part, marketing. I didn't have much of a budget, but I knew that social media was key to getting the word out. I spent hours creating content for Instagram, Facebook, and Reddit. I reached out to influencers in the home brewing community, offering them free boxes in exchange for reviews. Slowly but surely, the word started to spread. The first month, I had only 5 subscribers. It was a small number, but it felt like a huge victory. I was no longer just a person with an idea. I was an entrepreneur. Over the next few months, I continued to refine my process. I started adding more personalized touches to the boxes, such as handwritten notes, exclusive recipes, and unique merchandise. I also began offering limited edition boxes with collaborations from local craft breweries. The idea was to create a sense of exclusivity, making customers feel like they were part of something special. By the 6-month mark, I had around 100 subscribers. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough for me to take a step back and realize that I could actually turn this into a full-time business. So, I took the plunge. I quit my corporate job, knowing that if I didn't go all in now, I might always regret it. The next few months were a whirlwind. I had to learn everything, from managing cash flow to handling customer service. I had to adjust my expectations and accept that some months would be slow while others would be incredibly busy. But through it all, I remained focused on my customers and the experience I was providing them. I made sure every box was packed with care, every customer email was responded to promptly, and every social media post reflected the brand I was building. Things really started to pick up when I got featured in a popular home brewing blog. That article was a game changer. Orders started coming in faster than I could process them, and my subscriber count grew exponentially. I had to hire my first employee to help with packing and customer support, and soon after, I hired a marketing assistant to help manage social media and partnerships. Fast forward to today, and the business has grown beyond my wildest dreams. We've expanded our product range to include everything from home brewing kits to accessories, and even online courses for beginners. We've also started collaborating with breweries on special edition boxes, and we're looking into international shipping. There have been plenty of challenges along the way. From dealing with shipping delays to balancing customer expectations, I've faced my fair share of obstacles. But each setback has taught me something new. I've learned to pivot when necessary, to embrace failure as part of the process, and to always listen to my customers. They are the heart of my business, and without them, none of this would have been possible. I'm still the same person I was before, but now I'm doing something I'm truly passionate about. I don't have all the answers, and I'm far from perfect. But what I do have is a company I'm proud of, and the freedom to continue growing it into something even bigger. Most importantly, I've learned that entrepreneurship is not just about making money. It's about creating something that makes a difference in people's lives, and for me, that's the greatest reward. If you're thinking of starting a business, my advice is simple. Start small, keep learning, and don't be afraid to fail. The road is long, and it's not always easy, but if you're persistent, anything is possible. And remember, you don't have to have all the answers at the start. Just take that first step and figure it out along the way. I was just another broke 20-something, barely scraping by, when I decided to take the leap into entrepreneurship. The thought of running my own business seemed like an unattainable dream at first, but little did I know, the journey would reshape everything about who I am today. Looking back, I realize how much of it was about resilience, learning from mistakes, and keeping at it when everyone else thought I was crazy. Here's the full story. It all started about 5 years ago when I was working a dead-end job at a small tech company. My days consisted of endless meetings with clients who couldn't care less about my ideas and a lot of mind-numbing tasks that barely paid my bills. The dream of doing something on my own had always been in the back of my mind, but it never seemed like the right time. I had no savings, no safety net, and no idea where to even begin. But I was sick of my job, and I knew I had to do something different. I've always been into tech and gadgets, and I remember thinking one day, why don't I just start an online store that sells cool, niche tech products? The idea seemed simple enough. People love unique gadgets, and e-commerce was booming. I spent days researching, reading every blog, watching YouTube tutorials, and signing up for every free online course about starting a business. I had a business plan, a rough outline, and thought I was ready to dive in. The first hurdle came when I realized I had no money to actually start. I wasn't about to ask my parents for a loan, and taking out a personal loan seemed too risky. So, I did what any broke 22-year-old would do. I sold everything I didn't need. My gaming setup, old laptops, clothes, and even some furniture went up on eBay. After about a month of hustling, I had enough to fund the basic setup for my website and some initial inventory. It felt like I was on the right track. I launched the website with a selection of high-quality, unique gadgets. I spent sleepless nights tweaking the site, learning Shopify inside and out, and creating Instagram posts to build some kind of audience. At first, it was slow. I had no traffic, no sales, and no idea how to market my products. I remember feeling like I had just poured my savings into a black hole. But I refused to give up. One day, I stumbled across an article about influencer marketing. The concept sounded absurd to me at first, paying someone with a massive following to promote my products. But I was desperate. I had no other options, so I started reaching out to micro-influencers on Instagram, offering them free gadgets in exchange for posts. Some replied, some didn't, but a few said yes. The first influencer I worked with had a following of only 10,000 people, but that was enough to get the ball rolling. When their posts went live, the response was electric. My website traffic surged, and I had my first few sales. I remember the excitement when I saw the first order come through. It was only one item, but to me, it was proof that this could work. I felt like I was on top of the world. Over the next few months, I doubled down on influencer marketing. I started working with influencers who had bigger audiences, and slowly but surely, my brand gained traction. But there were still plenty of challenges. My supplier would sometimes mess up orders, sending the wrong products or delaying shipments. I had angry customers demanding refunds, and the stress started to pile on. I was working 16-hour days, handling customer service, fulfilling orders, and managing all the marketing myself. It felt like there was no end to the work. After about a year, the business was growing steadily, but I was burnt out. I had neglected my personal life, friends, and even my health. I knew something had to change. That's when I decided to scale. I couldn't keep doing everything myself, so I hired a part-time employee to help with customer service. I also outsourced the fulfillment side of the business to a third-party logistics company, which freed up a lot of time for me to focus on marketing and growth. I began running Facebook and Google ads, experimenting with different campaigns and refining my strategies. But just when I thought I was on a roll, a massive setback hit. A viral scandal about one of my suppliers broke out, and I found myself in the middle of a public relations nightmare. People started posting negative reviews about my company, accusing me of selling faulty products, even though I wasn't the one manufacturing them. I had to issue public statements, apologize to my customers, and quickly find new suppliers to rebuild trust. The whole experience felt like my dream was crumbling in front of me. But somehow, I made it through. I found new suppliers, improved my quality control processes, and put even more effort into customer service. It wasn't easy, but I started seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. My brand started to regain credibility, and my sales hit new highs. I could finally breathe a little easier. Fast forward to today, and my business has completely transformed. What started as a small online store selling gadgets is now a multi-million-dollar company. I've expanded into multiple product categories, hired a talented team of employees, and launched a second brand. But more importantly, I've learned so much about resilience, adaptability, and taking risks. I've learned that success isn't a straight line, and it's okay to stumble and fall, as long as you get back up and keep going. Now, I'm able to invest back into the business, run ads more strategically, and even take vacations without feeling like the world will fall apart. I've learned to delegate and trust my team to handle the day-to-day operations. I've learned that burnout is real, and self-care is important. I've learned that entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint. To anyone thinking about starting their own business, I want to say this: it's hard. It will test you in ways you can't even imagine. But if you're passionate, if you're willing to work relentlessly, and if you don't give up when things get tough, it can be the most rewarding experience of your life. Don't let anyone tell you it's not possible. Keep going, keep learning, and most importantly, keep believing in yourself. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. This is a story of how I went from being a broke college student with no connections to running my own e-commerce company that generates over 7 figures in annual revenue. It all started back in 2017, when I was a senior in college, about to graduate, and feeling the pressure of figuring out my future. I wasn't the best student. I'd always been more interested in working on side hustles than attending lectures. By the time senior year rolled around, I was down to my last semester. I knew I wasn't cut out for a 9-to-5 job, but I also didn't have the entrepreneurial know-how or resources to dive into a business of my own. Then, one day, in the middle of a particularly uninspiring accounting lecture, I decided to look up how to start an online business on my phone. This was a rabbit hole that I had visited before, but that day something clicked. I'd heard of dropshipping and thought it sounded easy enough: sell products without having to deal with inventory or shipping. The more I read, the more intrigued I became. I didn't have any money to invest, but I did have time and determination. The next step was figuring out what to sell. I knew from experience that the product had to be something I was passionate about. I had dabbled in sports throughout my life and always loved gear related to my favorite activities. It was a Friday night when I came across a few Facebook ads promoting high-quality resistance bands for fitness. I thought, hey, this could work. They're cheap to buy and people are always looking for ways to exercise at home. By Saturday morning, I had already set up a Shopify store, designed a simple logo, using a free online tool, and found a supplier on AliExpress who was selling the resistance bands. I didn't even know how to create a website beyond the basic template Shopify provided, but somehow I managed to get it running. I remember thinking, okay, this is either going to be the start of something big, or I'm going to fall flat on my face. I spent the next week learning as much as I could about Facebook ads, Instagram marketing, and search engine optimization. I didn't have much money, but I did have $100 in my bank account, which I put towards ads. I wrote a few ads and targeted fitness enthusiasts, mainly women between the ages of 18 and 40. I wasn't expecting much, but hoped for a sale or two to validate my idea. The first sale came 2 days later, and I was ecstatic. I can't explain the rush of seeing that first purchase notification. It was only $20, but that was all it took to convince me this could work. I started reinvesting every penny I earned back into the business. More Facebook ads, more research on how to optimize my store, and more trial and error. It wasn't an instant success. My first month, I made about $200 in sales. I was working late nights trying to improve the store, testing different ads, and learning from the results. I was spending hours learning Facebook ad strategies on YouTube, reading blogs, and reaching out to other entrepreneurs for advice. I didn't have anyone in my immediate circle who understood what I was trying to do. It was a lonely journey, but I knew I couldn't quit. By the second month, things started picking up. I got my first $1,000 in sales, and my ad strategies were finally starting to pay off. It was still a small amount of money, but it was proof that my hard work was paying off. Around this time, I started expanding the product line to include yoga mats, dumbbells, and other home fitness equipment. I made sure to only pick products that had good margins and would be easy to ship. Then came the tipping point. I hired my first freelancer to help with customer service and some basic administrative tasks. I was still in college at this point and didn't have the time to handle everything myself. It was a small investment, but it allowed me to focus on growing the business rather than getting bogged down by the day-to-day details. After that, it felt like things started to snowball. I launched an email marketing campaign, improved the website design, and optimized the checkout process. I also started reaching out to influencers to promote my products on Instagram. One of them had a modest following of 50,000, but when she posted about my resistance bands, the sales skyrocketed. It wasn't just one sale, it was hundreds. I made $10,000 in 1 week. That was a pivotal moment. I knew I was onto something real. By the time I graduated, I had built the foundation of a successful business. I didn't need to get a traditional job because the business had already surpassed my expectations. I decided to go full-time with the e-commerce store and continue to grow it while experimenting with new products and marketing strategies. Of course, things weren't always smooth sailing. There were countless challenges along the way. The supplier I was working with had a problem fulfilling orders on time, and I had to scramble to find alternatives. I faced an Instagram account ban after a misunderstanding with their algorithms and had to fight to get it reinstated. I went through months of slow sales due to a saturated market and had to pivot my business strategy multiple times. But I learned to embrace the struggle. Every failure was a lesson, and every obstacle was an opportunity to get better. One of the biggest changes came when I realized I needed to scale the business. I could no longer do everything myself. I hired a small team of virtual assistants to handle tasks like product sourcing, customer support, and order fulfillment. I also hired a few marketing specialists who helped take my social media strategy to the next level. Scaling up meant spending more on ads, investing in better tools, and fine-tuning every aspect of the business. But it also meant making bigger decisions, and those decisions had to be right. In 2021, my business hit the $1 million revenue mark. I still remember the day I looked at my sales numbers and realized I had crossed that threshold. It felt surreal. The hard work, the late nights, the failures, it all paid off. Now, I have a fully automated business that runs without my constant supervision. We've expanded into new niches like wellness products, and the team I've built is amazing. I'm still learning every day, but I'm no longer the broke college student with no direction. I've achieved the freedom I always wanted. The most important lesson I learned throughout this journey is to never stop learning. You're going to make mistakes, and you'll often feel like you're in over your head. But if you keep pushing through, ask the right questions, and surround yourself with people who know more than you, success will follow. I'm not saying it's easy. I still work long hours, and the pressure is always there. But it's the kind of pressure I enjoy. It's the pressure of building something that's mine, something I created out of nothing. And every time I look at the revenue numbers or hear customer feedback, I know it was all worth it. So to anyone out there thinking about starting their own business, take the leap. You won't regret it. Just be prepared to hustle, learn from your failures, and keep going even when it feels impossible. The road is long, but the rewards are worth it. I was broke. Not the, I'm going through a rough patch kind of broke. I was the, I don't know if I can eat next week kind of broke. I remember sitting in my one-bedroom apartment, the walls paper thin, with a mattress on the floor. My kitchen had no furniture except for a rusty fridge and a beat-up stove that barely worked. The only thing I could rely on was my laptop, which I had to sell my Xbox to afford. At 26, I had just quit my job in corporate sales, and my savings were running low. I'd gotten caught up in the daily grind, thinking I was working my way up, but it felt like I was just spinning my wheels. The job paid well, but it wasn't fulfilling. My boss, a man with an ego bigger than his sales numbers, seemed to be stuck in a never-ending loop of micromanaging, and I was sick of it. I was looking for a way out. The idea of starting my own business had always lingered in the back of my mind, but the idea of failure terrified me. What if I ended up in a worse position than before? What if I couldn't make it work? Still, I couldn't shake the desire to do something for myself, to create something of value that I could control. I started by researching the types of businesses that didn't require a lot of capital to start. I didn't have the luxury of a rich uncle or a large investment. Every dollar I spent felt like a gamble. Eventually, I stumbled upon a niche market, print-on-demand t-shirts. It seemed like a low-risk way to get started. You don't need inventory. You don't need to deal with fulfillment. You simply design, list your products, and a third-party company takes care of the rest. I spent the next few weeks learning about graphic design, setting up an online store, and trying to come up with catchy t-shirt slogans. I'll admit, some of my designs were pretty bad, awkward fonts and cheesy graphics, but I didn't let that stop me. I didn't have any experience in design or e-commerce, but I was determined to figure it out. After setting up my store, I created a few designs that I thought had potential. I posted them online, did a little marketing through social media, and then sat back, nervously checking my phone every few minutes. Day 1, nothing. Day 2, still nothing. Week 1 passed, and I had made a grand total of 0 sales. I started to question my decision. Maybe it was a stupid idea. Maybe no one cared about my designs. I didn't give up, though. I kept tweaking my designs, adjusting the colors, testing out different marketing strategies. I even started reaching out to people in online communities, offering free samples in exchange for feedback. Slowly, my efforts began to pay off. I got my first sale, a $20 shirt to a complete stranger in another state. I was ecstatic. It wasn't much, but it was validation. I wasn't crazy. This could work. I started to experiment with different types of designs. I noticed that certain themes were resonating more with people than others. Motivational quotes, funny sayings, and niche humor, people loved them. I made sure to stay active on social media, posting regularly and engaging with my small but growing audience. I wasn't making a fortune, but each sale felt like a step in the right direction. After a few months, my sales began to pick up. I was making enough to cover my bills, which felt like a major victory. I still wasn't making much profit, but I was learning fast. I realized I had to scale up if I wanted to take this seriously. I reinvested every dollar I earned back into the business, improving my website, hiring freelance designers to create more polished designs, and running Facebook ads. One day, I got a message from someone who had bought one of my shirts. She loved it and wanted to feature it in a fashion blog she ran. She said she had a solid following, and that kind of exposure could be a game changer. I couldn't believe it. A simple shout-out from a blogger was about to change everything. The exposure from that blog post led to a surge in sales. People began to discover my brand, and I started getting orders from all over the country. It felt like I had finally caught a break. But with that success came a new set of challenges. Suddenly, I had to manage more inventory, ensure that shipments were timely, and handle customer service inquiries. It was no longer a side hustle. It was a real business. The next hurdle was scaling. I knew that if I wanted to take this to the next level, I had to invest in more infrastructure. I hired a part-time virtual assistant to help with customer service, and I outsourced the design work to a talented freelancer I had met online. This allowed me to focus on marketing and the strategic growth of the business. As my brand grew, so did the pressure. There were nights when I barely slept, trying to keep up with orders and optimize my marketing campaigns. But it was exhilarating. The hustle was real, and it felt like I was finally building something that mattered. The profits started rolling in, and soon, I was able to hire a small team to handle different aspects of the business. By year 2, my business had grown beyond just t-shirts. I expanded into other types of merchandise, hoodies, mugs, phone cases, and even tote bags. My brand began to develop a unique identity, and I started to focus on creating a community around it. I engaged with my customers, ran social media contests, and created limited edition designs that sold out within hours. My followers were no longer just customers, they were fans, and that connection made all the difference. I remember the first time I looked at my bank account and saw a 6-figure income. It wasn't the number that impressed me, though. It was the realization that I had built this from nothing. No investors, no fancy degrees, just a ton of hard work, perseverance, and a willingness to fail and learn from it. I had taken a huge risk, and it had paid off. Today, my business is still growing. It's not easy, but it's the kind of challenge I'm excited to face every day. I've expanded into international markets, and I'm exploring new avenues to diversify my brand. I've hired a fantastic team, and we're building something we all believe in. Looking back, I'm grateful for every failure and every sleepless night. Those were the moments that shaped me. The road to success wasn't linear. It was full of detours, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But in the end, the journey was worth it. So, to anyone who's on the edge of making the leap into entrepreneurship, it's terrifying, yes. But if you believe in yourself and keep pushing forward, you'll be surprised at what you can achieve. Don't let fear of failure hold you back. Sometimes, taking that first step is all it takes to change your life forever. I had always known I wanted to run my own business. From a young age, I would spend hours dreaming up ways to make money and start something of my own. But growing up in a small town, with little more than a public library and a local grocery store, the idea of entrepreneurship felt more like a far-off fantasy than something achievable. My family wasn't wealthy, and while they always encouraged me to dream big, they were also very practical, sometimes to the point of discouragement when it came to risky ideas. I took a traditional route to adulthood, graduating high school, attending college, and then getting a job in a corporate setting. I figured, like most people, that climbing the corporate ladder would eventually lead me to the success I craved. But after several years of working in marketing at a well-known tech company, I realized something. I wasn't passionate about the work. The 9-to-5 grind, the constant pressure to meet deadlines, the endless meetings where everyone seemed to be talking in circles, it was draining. Then one evening, I had an epiphany. It was an average Thursday, and I had just returned from a team dinner where we'd spend hours discussing a marketing campaign I honestly couldn't care less about. As I sat at my kitchen table that night, I started reflecting on my life, on the dreams I had when I was younger. I'd always wanted to start something that could make an impact, something that was mine. So I decided then and there that I was going to quit my job and start my own business. I didn't know what exactly, but I knew it had to be something I was passionate about. I gave my notice the next day. I had no concrete plan, no investor lined up, no safety net. I did, however, have a few months of savings, which I figured would give me just enough time to figure things out. It was scary, but liberating. I remember the sense of relief I felt when I handed in my resignation letter. It was as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. But reality quickly set in. I had no business experience, no connections, and no idea where to start. I spent weeks researching, reading books, watching YouTube videos, and attending local meetups for aspiring entrepreneurs. I narrowed it down to a few ideas. I considered an e-commerce store, a digital marketing agency, and a tech startup. But none of these ideas felt quite right. One day, while shopping at a local farmer's market, I had an idea that changed everything. I noticed a vendor selling homemade soap. It was beautifully crafted, with all natural ingredients, and it caught my eye. But as I looked closer, I realized there was a significant gap in the market. Most of the products sold at these kinds of markets were either overpriced or mass-produced with low-quality ingredients. I thought, I could make something better than this. Something that feels personal, high quality, and accessible. I began researching the soap-making process. I spent weeks learning everything I could, experimenting in my kitchen, and talking to other soap makers. It wasn't easy. There were a lot of failed batches, a lot of trial and error, but I kept at it. Eventually, I was able to create a product I was proud of, handmade soap made from all natural ingredients with unique scents and designs. I branded it as a luxury yet affordable product that anyone could enjoy. At first, it was just a small operation. I was making soap in my kitchen, packaging it by hand, and selling it online. I spent hours creating a website, setting up an Instagram account, and promoting my products through word of mouth. My first sale was a huge milestone for me. I remember jumping up and down when I received that email notification. It was a sign that I was on the right path. But as the weeks went on, I faced new challenges. I had underestimated the time it would take to manage every aspect of the business. Between making soap, packing orders, responding to emails, and managing social media, I was burning out quickly. I also realized I was still missing the bigger picture branding. I needed a unique identity to stand out in a crowded market. So, I hired a freelance designer to help me revamp my logo and packaging. I also reached out to influencers in the beauty and wellness space to try and get my products into their hands. Slowly but surely, the brand began to grow. I added more products, bath bombs, body scrubs, candles, and eventually expanded to wholesale, selling my products to local boutiques and small stores. One of the hardest parts was managing the financial side of things. I didn't have any formal training in accounting or finance, and I made plenty of mistakes early on. I remember one month when I was low on cash and had to decide between paying suppliers or paying myself. I had to dip into my savings to keep the business afloat. There were a lot of sleepless nights and moments when I questioned if I had made the right choice by quitting my job. But somehow, I kept pushing through. About a year into the business, something clicked. I finally had enough revenue to hire a part-time employee to help with production and customer service. This was a game changer. With the extra help, I was able to focus on growing the business, improving marketing, and refining the product line. I also started attending trade shows and networking with other small business owners, which opened doors I hadn't even considered. The biggest turning point came when a well-known lifestyle influencer featured my soap on their Instagram story. The orders started pouring in. What had once been a small operation from my kitchen became a legitimate business. The exposure was overwhelming, but it was also the boost I needed to take things to the next level. Within 2 years, my business had grown beyond what I ever imagined. I was able to move production into a small warehouse, hire a full-time team, and expand the brand internationally. We began offering workshops on soap making, launched a subscription box service, and continued to develop new, innovative products. My products were sold in hundreds of stores across the country, and I even started getting inquiries from larger retail chains. Looking back, I realized that the hardest part of the journey wasn't the sleepless nights, the financial struggles, or the overwhelming number of tasks. It was trusting myself, trusting that I could learn, adapt, and keep going even when things seemed impossible. There were so many moments where I thought about quitting, but I didn't. I learned from every failure, and I celebrated every small victory. As my business continues to grow, I'm more passionate than ever about what I'm doing. I've learned that entrepreneurship is not a straight path. It's a winding road with unexpected twists and turns. But with resilience, creativity, and a bit of luck, anything is possible. Now, I'm proud to say that my small soap business has grown into a thriving brand. It's not just a product, it's a story. A story of persistence, learning, and believing that I could make something of my own. And if I can do it, anyone can. I started my entrepreneurial journey just out of college with no idea what I was doing. I was fresh out of a marketing degree, and I thought I knew everything there was to know about business. But I quickly learned that textbook knowledge doesn't prepare you for the real world. The first few years were nothing like I imagined. It was an uphill battle with plenty of failures, near bankruptcies, and moments where I thought I might have made the biggest mistake of my life. My first venture was a digital marketing agency. It felt like a natural next step because I had a degree in marketing and had worked as an intern at a few agencies during college. I had a pretty good grasp of SEO, paid ads, and content creation, so I was confident that I could start something successful. I took a loan from the bank, used all my savings, and spent every penny on building a website, creating a brand, and reaching out to potential clients. My plan was to land a few small businesses and slowly scale from there. I started by reaching out to local businesses. I made cold calls, sent hundreds of emails, and used every trick I knew to get people to notice me. After weeks of pushing, I landed my first client. They were a small local gym looking to grow their membership base. I thought this was it, the big break I had been waiting for. But here's the thing I didn't know. I wasn't nearly as good as I thought I was. I ran the gym's ads, optimized their website, and created content, but the results were underwhelming. The gym owner wasn't happy with the progress, and despite my best efforts, I couldn't fix things. This first failure hit hard. The gym owner didn't renew the contract, and I was left wondering where I went wrong. It was a punch in the gut, and I was honestly questioning whether I was cut out for this whole business thing. But I couldn't give up. I had put everything on the line, and the idea of going back to a regular job just didn't sit well with me. I spent weeks reflecting on what went wrong, looking for ways to improve, and trying to get better at my craft. I realized that I was just doing the same thing everyone else was doing. I needed a unique angle, something that would make my agency stand out. That's when I started to niche down. Instead of trying to serve every business, I decided to focus on one industry. I researched industries that had a high demand for digital marketing but weren't being served well, and I landed on the restaurant industry. I figured that restaurants could benefit from better online marketing, especially since most of them weren't taking full advantage of social media or online ordering systems. So, I rebranded my agency and began reaching out specifically to restaurants. This time, I didn't just offer SEO and paid ads. I bundled everything: social media management, email marketing, content creation, and website optimization into one package. I focused on showing restaurant owners how my services could increase their sales and streamline their operations. I wasn't just offering a service, I was offering a solution to their pain points. It worked. I landed my first restaurant client, a small Italian bistro. We ran a few promotions, optimized their website, and built up their social media following. In just a few months, their sales began to rise. They were happy, and word of mouth spread. I got more restaurant clients, and the business began to snowball. But as I grew my agency, I started running into new challenges. The biggest one? Hiring and managing employees. For the first year, it was just me and a few freelancers. I did everything: client meetings, strategy development, running ads, creating content, and managing customer service. It was overwhelming, and I was burning out fast. But I knew I needed to scale if I wanted to grow the business further. I made my first full-time hire, an account manager to handle client relationships. I thought this would free up my time, but instead, it caused more problems. I struggled to let go of control, and I was constantly micromanaging. The account manager wasn't able to manage clients the way I wanted, and this led to some serious tension between us. I spent months trying to figure out how to build a team that could work without me overseeing every little detail. Eventually, I realized that I needed to change my approach. I had been focused on hiring people who could do exactly what I did, but I wasn't empowering them to succeed on their own. I started focusing on hiring specialists, people who were experts in specific areas like graphic design, social media strategy, or copywriting. I began trusting them more, letting them take ownership of their work, and giving them the tools they needed to succeed. The team began to gel, and things started running more smoothly. By year 3, my agency was growing steadily. But there was one more challenge ahead: client churn. Despite our best efforts, we lost a number of clients every year. Some were unhappy with results, others couldn't afford our services, and a few just decided to go in a different direction. I realized that if I wanted to build a truly sustainable business, I needed to create something that would keep clients coming back for the long term. I decided to launch an online marketing course for restaurant owners. I had worked with enough restaurants by that point to know exactly what they needed, and I figured I could help them succeed without them having to hire an agency. I built a course that covered everything from setting up a website to running Facebook ads to managing online reviews. The idea was to give restaurant owners the tools and knowledge they needed to market their businesses on their own. The course turned out to be a huge success. Restaurant owners who couldn't afford my agency's services still found value in the course, and many of them came back as paying clients once they saw the results they could achieve on their own. This course became a major revenue stream for my business, and it also helped me build a stronger relationship with my clients. Fast forward to today, and I'm proud to say that my agency is thriving. We've worked with over 500 restaurants, launched multiple successful marketing campaigns, and helped countless businesses grow. We've expanded our services to other industries, and I've even built a team of 20 employees. My business is no longer just a small agency, it's a full-fledged operation that generates millions in revenue every year. But looking back, I realized that none of this would have happened if I had given up after my first failure. The road to success was filled with obstacles, but each failure taught me something valuable. I learned that entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint. It's about persistence, adaptability, and constantly learning from your mistakes. If you're thinking about starting a business, my advice is simple: expect failure, embrace it, and keep pushing forward. Don't be afraid to make mistakes or change directions. And most importantly, trust in your ability to learn and grow. The journey is long and tough, but the rewards are worth it. I'm an entrepreneur, and this is my story of how I went from barely scraping by to building a 6-figure business in 3 years. I hope it serves as a reminder that the path to success is messy and unpredictable, but with the right mindset and relentless effort, you can overcome almost anything. A little over 3 years ago, I found myself sitting in a small apartment with no real direction. I was 26, living paycheck to paycheck, and feeling lost. The job I had at the time wasn't terrible, but it wasn't where I wanted to be. I'd graduated from college a few years prior, but my degree wasn't something that made me passionate, and I knew I needed to make a change. It was the winter of 2021 when I had my aha moment. I was in the middle of an exhausting day at my 9-to-5 job. I'd been working long hours, juggling a mix of client meetings and administrative work. As I sat in my cubicle, scrolling mindlessly through social media, I stumbled upon a post from an entrepreneur who'd turned a simple idea into a multi-million-dollar business. It wasn't some high-tech innovation or a brilliant invention. It was a fitness subscription box. She started by simply putting together workout-related products and sending them to subscribers every month. I was struck by how simple the concept was. I had always been passionate about fitness, and I loved the idea of helping others achieve their health goals. I thought, why can't I do this? I started researching fitness products, subscription models, and everything I could find about building a business in the fitness industry. After a few weeks of research, I came up with a plan. I would start a fitness subscription service, but with a twist. I would curate personalized workout plans and add exclusive fitness tips with each delivery. Of course, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows from the start. I had no real business experience, and the idea of putting money into a business without knowing if it would work terrified me. I had a little savings, but I was careful not to burn through it too quickly. So, I started small. I launched a basic website with a few subscription options, using a service that allowed me to create the site without having to hire a developer. Then, I turned to social media, which was free, to get the word out. I posted fitness tips, workout videos, and motivational quotes every day to build an audience. The first month was brutal. I got only a handful of subscribers, and the feedback wasn't great. People liked the idea but didn't seem committed. I spent a lot of time tweaking my product offerings and refining my approach. I learned the hard way that people weren't just interested in a workout plan. They wanted accountability, community, and support. So, I built a private Facebook group where my subscribers could connect, share progress, and motivate each other. Slowly but surely, the business started gaining traction. At this point, I realized that I couldn't keep doing everything by myself. The logistics were becoming overwhelming. I was packing boxes late into the night, responding to customer queries in between, and still trying to work my day job. I didn't have enough hours in the day, but I didn't want to give up either. I made the difficult decision to quit my job and go all in on my business. I wasn't making enough to fully support myself, but I believed in my idea. It was a risky move, but I knew I had to take the leap if I wanted to see if this could work. The first few months after quitting my job were challenging. The stress of running the business full-time was intense, and the income was inconsistent. There were days when I doubted myself. Was I doing the right thing? Was this all just a pipe dream? But I kept pushing forward. I reinvested every penny back into the business, from hiring freelance marketers to improving the packaging and shipping process. Then, something clicked. I had been consistently growing my social media following, but one video I posted on Instagram went viral. It was a simple workout challenge that I created using only bodyweight exercises. People loved it, and they shared it all over their feeds. Suddenly, I had an influx of new subscribers. I was overwhelmed but ecstatic. I couldn't believe that all my hard work was starting to pay off. From that moment on, the business grew quickly. I found suppliers who offered better deals, and I streamlined the process of creating the monthly boxes. I also expanded my product range, adding items like workout accessories, supplements, and branded gear. I hired my first employee to handle customer service and operations, which freed me up to focus on strategy and growth. But growth came with its own set of challenges. The bigger the business got, the more complicated things became. I had to deal with inventory management, supplier issues, shipping delays, and customer complaints. The pressure was higher than ever. There were days when I felt completely overwhelmed and unsure if I could keep up. But I stayed focused on the bigger picture, constantly reminding myself why I started this journey in the first place. By the end of the second year, I had a solid customer base, a streamlined business model, and a clear vision of where I wanted to take the company. The subscriptions kept coming in, and we expanded into new markets. My revenue had tripled, and I had reinvested most of it into expanding the brand. I started collaborating with influencers and brands to get my name out there even more. In just over 2 years, I had turned a simple fitness subscription service into a full-fledged brand with a loyal community. Now, in 2025, I have a 6-figure business with over 10,000 active subscribers. I've built a team of 5 employees, and I'm finally at a point where I can take a breath and appreciate how far I've come. Of course, there are still challenges, and the road ahead is never guaranteed, but I've learned a few key lessons along the way. First, taking risks is necessary for growth. I could have stayed in my comfortable job and kept living paycheck to paycheck, but by taking the leap into entrepreneurship, I opened the door to opportunities one never thought possible. Second, persistence pays off. There were countless times when I wanted to quit or felt like I was spinning my wheels, but sticking with it and refining my approach over time made all the difference. Third, surrounding yourself with the right people is critical. I've learned that you can't do everything alone. Whether it's hiring the right team, finding mentors, or building a community of like-minded entrepreneurs, having people around you who believe in you is invaluable. It hasn't been an easy journey, but looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. From struggling to make ends meet to building a business I'm proud of, every step has been worth it. And I'm excited to see what the next chapter holds. If you're out there thinking about starting your own business, don't wait for the perfect moment. There will never be one. Just start, learn as you go, and don't give up. It's all part of the journey. This is the story of how I turned my side hustle into a $1 million business, and it all started with a mistake. I've always been the kind of person who needs to have something to work on. When I was younger, I was the kid selling candy to my classmates, and in my 20s, I worked a 9-to-5 job while dabbling in side businesses that never seemed to take off. But none of it really clicked for me until a small error at work changed the trajectory of my life. It all began when I was working as a junior software engineer at a small tech company. One afternoon, my manager asked me to review some code, and I, being a bit too overconfident, skimmed through it quickly and pushed the changes live. Within minutes, we realized that the changes I made had broken part of the system, and it caused a delay for our clients. The fallout wasn't major, but it did result in a few angry emails, a few hours of downtime, and a very uncomfortable meeting with my boss. I was mortified. I'd messed up, and it felt like it was the end of the world. I began doubting myself, questioning if I was even cut out for a tech career. I couldn't stop thinking about the failure. Later that evening, when I got home, I was still stewing over the incident. Instead of feeling sorry for myself, I decided to distract myself by working on a side project that I'd been thinking about for months, creating an app that would help people organize their daily tasks more efficiently. I had an idea for a simple app that would allow users to create custom to-do lists, set reminders, and track their goals, but with an added twist. I wanted the app to be highly customizable, allowing people to color code tasks, add icons, and even set different themes for different moods. The app would help users feel more in control of their day-to-day activities, rather than simply being a digital list. I had no expectations at first. It started as a way to unwind from the stressful day, but as I worked on it, the idea grew. I spent the next couple of weeks perfecting the app in my free time, learning more about mobile app development, and testing it out on my friends and family. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with most people saying they wish they had something like this years ago. I remember the day I launched it. I put the app on the App Store and Google Play Store, and I didn't really expect much. I didn't have a marketing budget, no PR team, and zero experience with app launches. I just thought I'd give it a shot. To my surprise, the app gained some traction. A few bloggers wrote about it, and I started getting a few downloads a day. Slowly, word spread. People liked the clean interface, the features, and how easy it was to use. Over the next few months, downloads kept increasing, and I was thrilled. But this was still a side project, and I was busy with my full-time job. Then came the turning point. A well-known productivity influencer on YouTube mentioned my app in one of their videos. They did a short review of it, talking about how it was the perfect tool for managing tasks and staying on top of goals. My app exploded overnight. Downloads shot up, and within a week, I had more downloads than I could have ever imagined. At first, I didn't know what to do with all the attention. My inbox was flooded with user feedback, emails asking for updates, and even some people asking if they could invest in my company. I had to figure out how to handle the business side of things fast. I decided to quit my job. I knew that my app was gaining serious momentum, and this was my chance to turn it into a full-time venture. I took the plunge, leaving my comfortable job and focusing entirely on growing my app. The first few months were a blur of app updates, marketing strategies, and trying to keep up with user demand. The business side of things was overwhelming at first. There were so many details I hadn't anticipated: managing a team of contractors, negotiating deals with advertisers, handling finances, but I was driven. The biggest hurdle came when I realized that my app needed to be monetized. I had created a free version, but I was running out of funds to support its continued development. I didn't want to charge users right away, but I knew I had to make money somehow. After some trial and error, I decided to offer a premium subscription with added features, advanced task tracking analytics, a cloud backup feature, and custom widgets for home screens. To my surprise, people paid for it. The business began to grow steadily. I expanded the app to include a web version, started running ads, and offered affiliate links for productivity tools. Slowly but surely, I began building a revenue stream. A year after quitting my job, my side hustle was no longer a hobby. It was a legitimate business, generating millions in revenue annually. However, success didn't come without its challenges. There were many late nights, stress, and doubts along the way. At one point, I thought I was going to burn out. The pressure to keep innovating and keeping up with competitors was immense. But I reminded myself of how far I'd come. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the impact I was having. The app was helping people. I was getting messages from users telling me how my app had helped them organize their lives, reduce stress, and achieve their goals. Fast forward 5 years, and I'm now the CEO of a company that employs 50 people. We've expanded our offerings to include a suite of productivity tools beyond just the task management app. I've started a second business in a completely different industry, and I've invested in other startups. But none of that would have happened if I hadn't made that mistake at work all those years ago. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that sometimes failure is the best thing that can happen to you. My mistake taught me to trust myself, take risks, and seize opportunities. I never would have started my app if I hadn't made that embarrassing error. That mistake pushed me to start thinking outside the box, and ultimately, it led me down a path that changed my life forever. So, to anyone out there who's struggling with failure or feeling down about a setback, remember that it might be the very thing that propels you forward. Mistakes don't define you. What you do after those mistakes does. Now, I look back on that day at work, and while I'm still a little embarrassed about the whole thing, I'm thankful for the push it gave me to start something bigger. That one mistake was the start of a new chapter in my life. And if I can do it, so can you. Just keep going. I started my journey as an entrepreneur in my early 20s, full of ambition and a clear vision of what I wanted to achieve. It wasn't easy, and looking back, I realized that there were so many things I wish I had known before taking the leap. But as they say, hindsight is 20/20ths, and sometimes it's the mistakes and challenges that teach you the most valuable lessons. It all began when I was working a regular 9-to-5 job in a tech company. I was good at my work, and I had a steady income, but something was missing. I had the feeling that I was destined for something more. At that point, I started thinking about my own business, a product or service that would allow me to be in control of my own future. I spent months brainstorming, writing down ideas, researching industries, and listening to podcasts. There were hundreds of possibilities. I knew I had a passion for technology, but I also wanted something that would solve a problem or meet an unmet need. After some trial and error, I came up with an idea, a mobile app that would help people find the best deals on local services like car repair, home maintenance, and even dog walking. The idea seemed simple enough, but I was determined to take it further. At that point, I didn't have any technical background. I had basic programming knowledge, but nothing that could make the vision come to life. I knew I had to either learn everything from scratch or partner up with someone who had the right skills. That's when I reached out to a friend from college who was a software developer. He had always been the go-to person for coding projects, and I trusted his abilities. We agreed to work together, and just like that, we were off to the races. We spent months developing the app. It wasn't easy. There were countless hours spent debugging, redesigning features, and rethinking our approach. But every time we hit a roadblock, we found a way to push through it. The biggest challenge was funding. I didn't have much money to begin with, and neither did my partner. We were both living paycheck to paycheck, so we decided to bootstrap the business as best as we could. We lived frugally, cut back on expenses, and invested all the little savings we had into the business. The first few months were rough. We had a working prototype, but we needed users. The problem was, no one knew about us. We spent hours cold calling local businesses, trying to get them to list their services on our platform. Most of them turned us down, and some didn't even bother to respond. It was a constant uphill battle. On top of that, I still had my day job, so I was juggling both responsibilities. Some nights, I'd be up until 2 a.m. working on the app, only to get a few hours of sleep before heading to the office the next day. It was exhausting, but I was determined. Then, one day, after months of pushing and barely making any progress, we landed our first big break. A local plumbing company agreed to list their services on our platform. It wasn't much, but it was a start. We were ecstatic. We celebrated, but we didn't stop there. We continued to pitch to businesses, and slowly but surely, more signed on. Word spread, and eventually we had a small but growing user base. As time went on, I started to see the potential for growth. The app was gaining traction, but I knew that in order to scale it, we needed more investment. That was a huge step for me. I had never gone through the process of pitching to investors before, and the idea of giving away equity in my company made me feel uneasy. However, I realized that it was necessary if we wanted to take things to the next level. I spent weeks preparing a pitch deck, practicing my presentation, and reaching out to potential investors. It wasn't easy to get meetings, and the first few attempts were a bust, but I didn't give up. Eventually, I found an angel investor who was willing to take a chance on us. We secured enough funding to hire a small team and bring on additional developers, designers, and marketers to help with growth. The money helped, but it also came with new challenges. Now that we had a team to manage, I had to step up as a leader. I had never managed people before, and I quickly realized that being a boss was a lot harder than I had anticipated. Balancing the needs of the company with the needs of the employees, ensuring everyone was motivated, and making tough decisions became part of my daily routine. There were times when I doubted myself, when things weren't going as planned, when the product had bugs we couldn't fix, or when customers complained. I often wondered if I had made a huge mistake. But every time I felt that way, I reminded myself of the bigger picture. This was my dream, and I wasn't going to give up that easily. Eventually, the hard work started to pay off. The app grew in popularity, we expanded to new cities, and our team became more cohesive. We raised another round of funding, which allowed us to improve the product and bring on even more employees. The traction we gained helped us attract attention from bigger companies, and partnerships started rolling in. Fast forward to today, and the company is a lot larger than I ever imagined it would be. We've expanded internationally, have millions of users, and are now one of the leading platforms in the industry. It's still a work in progress, and there are always new challenges to overcome, but the journey has been incredibly rewarding. Looking back, there are several things I would do differently, and I've learned so much along the way. The most important lesson I've learned is that success doesn't come overnight. It's the result of countless hours of hard work, perseverance, and a willingness to fail and get back up again. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Start now. You'll never know everything, and there will always be obstacles, but that's part of the process. Don't let fear hold you back. Take the leap and go after your dreams. I still remember the nights I spent wondering if it would all be worth it, and now I can say with confidence that it was. And for anyone who feels like they're stuck in a job they don't love, just know that the opportunity to change your life is in your hands. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. And that's how I went from a 9 to 5 job with no idea what I was doing to becoming the founder of a successful tech company. The journey wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I was 26, living in a small apartment in the city, when I decided to quit my job and start a business. I had no savings to speak of, no special skills, and no idea what I was doing. But I had a dream, and I figured that was as good a place to start as any. So, I told my boss I was leaving, packed up my things, and set out to build something from scratch. This is the story of how I went from being broke and unsure to running a successful business that I'm proud of today. It all started when I was working at a corporate job that I absolutely hated. I was a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized company, and every day felt like I was stuck in a cubicle prison. The work was repetitive, the hours were long, and the pay wasn't even that great. I had this nagging feeling that I was meant to do something more, but I had no clue what. I wasn't one of those people who had a clear entrepreneurial vision from the start. I wasn't selling lemonade as a kid or designing apps in high school. In fact, I had barely even thought about starting a business. But I knew I wanted freedom from the cubicle, from the micromanaging, from the life that felt like it was on autopilot. So one morning, I walked into my boss's office and handed in my resignation. The next few months were a blur of uncertainty. I had no backup plan and very little in savings, but I was determined to figure it out. I started brainstorming ideas for businesses, none of which seemed to stick. I tried thinking of things I was passionate about, travel, food, fitness, but nothing felt like it would be financially viable. It was during this time that I realized something important. I didn't need to be passionate about the idea. I needed to solve a problem that people had. That's when the idea hit me. I'd always been good at finding small, overlooked problems and fixing them. My friends would joke that I was a problem solver because I would always suggest solutions to issues no one else seemed to notice. So I decided to start a business focused on providing simple, everyday solutions. I didn't know exactly what it would look like, But I figured the best place to start was by observing the problems I faced on a daily basis. I spent the next few weeks going about my day-to-day life, paying close attention to the small annoyances and inefficiencies that I usually brushed off. One day, while grocery shopping, I realized how much time I spent standing in line at the checkout. That's when it hit me: self-checkout machines. Why didn't more stores offer them? I wasn't sure if it was a viable business idea, but I started researching and quickly realized that a growing number of stores were beginning to integrate self-checkout technology, but many small businesses hadn't jumped on board yet. I decided to reach out to local businesses and pitch the idea of self-checkout solutions. The pitch was simple. I would provide an affordable and easy-to-implement self-checkout system for small stores that couldn't afford the expensive options from big tech companies. The idea wasn't revolutionary, but it was something that could make a real difference for small business owners. The first few months were rough. I didn't have any experience in tech, and the idea of selling hardware and software was intimidating. But I kept pushing forward, learning everything I could about the technology and reaching out to local business owners. To my surprise, many of them were receptive. They liked the idea of improving their checkout process and reducing wait times, but they were hesitant about the costs. I needed to find a way to make the solution affordable without cutting corners. I worked tirelessly to build relationships with suppliers and negotiate lower prices for the hardware I needed. I also found a freelance software developer who was willing to work with me at a lower rate in exchange for equity in the company. Slowly but surely, things started to come together. I secured my first client, a local grocery store, and installed my first self-checkout system. It was a huge milestone, but also a huge risk. I had invested nearly every penny I had into the project, and if it didn't work, I would be in a very bad place. But when the system was up and running, the results were immediate. Customers loved the self-checkout option, and the store owner saw a noticeable reduction in wait times and an increase in customer satisfaction. I knew I was onto something, but I also knew that one client wasn't enough to sustain a business. I needed to scale. So, I focused on finding more clients, refining my pitch, and building a reputation for reliability and customer service. I started offering free consultations to business owners and would visit their stores to assess their checkout processes. Word of mouth spread, and soon I had a steady stream of clients coming in. Each time I landed a new client, I reinvested the profits into expanding the business, hiring more employees, upgrading the software, and improving the hardware. Over the next few years, my business grew steadily. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of moments when I questioned whether I was making the right choice. I remember one particularly rough month when cash flow was tight, and I had to borrow money from friends to make payroll. But I stuck with it, and things eventually turned around. By the time I turned 30, my company had a small team of dedicated employees, and we had expanded our services to other cities. Looking back, I can see how much I've changed as an entrepreneur. At the beginning, I was scared and uncertain. I didn't have the experience or the skills, but I was willing to learn. I made countless mistakes along the way, some of them costly, but I learned from every failure and kept moving forward. The biggest lesson I learned was that success doesn't come from having the perfect idea or the best product. It comes from the willingness to put in the work, solve problems, and keep improving. Today, my business is thriving. We provide self-checkout solutions to small and medium-sized stores all over the country, and we're constantly expanding and innovating. I still have days where I feel overwhelmed, but I've learned to embrace the uncertainty and trust in the process. I'm proud of what I've built, but I'm even prouder of the person I've become along the way. Entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart, but if you're willing to take risks, learn from your mistakes, and keep pushing forward, you can achieve things you never thought possible. If I can do it, so can you. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.